everybody. I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us for ILTV's weekly program, One-on-One with Alan Dershowitz. We want to give you, our viewers, a chance to have your questions answered by Professor Dershowitz, one of America's greatest legal minds. He's a leading expert on criminal and constitutional law, civil liberties, and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Hi, Professor Dershowitz. It's so great to see you again.
Thank you.
All right, Professor, let's begin with the issue that is on everybody's minds. A special counsel has been appointed to lead a probe into U.S. President Donald Trump's ties to Russia, and that's all coming on the heels of the American leader leaking top-secret Israeli intelligence to the Russians. So our question for you is, how will this impact his upcoming visit to Israel? How will this news impact Israeli and American intelligence cooperation in the future? Are we going to be seeing a change of any sort?
Well, we're seeing a somewhat weakened president. He already tweeted this recently, saying this is the worst witch hunt against any American president. The appointment of a special counsel is not going to solve the problem. Remember, the special counsel only has jurisdiction to look into crimes. And even if there was close coordination between the campaign of Donald Trump and the Russians, there's nothing criminal about that. And even if he did leak information to the Russians, which could have led the Russians to identify the sources and methods used by Israel, there's nothing criminal about that. And even if he fired the FBI for bad motives, there's nothing criminal about that. And even if he asked the FBI director to let it go on his national security advisor, there's nothing criminal about that. So we're not going to get to the bottom of what happened because the special counsel will take witnesses in secret. It'll be in front of the grand jury. And in the end, he'll decide yes or no whether to indict. So this is not going to solve the problem of learning what really happened. A much better idea, both for Trump and for the American public, would have been for Congress to appoint a special investigative commission of the kind that it did when the Challenger exploded and when 9/11 occurred. They appointed real experts, not with an eye toward prosecution, but with an eye toward learning the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That would have been a better course of conduct. I know Robert Mueller. He's a very straight-shooting, decent, honorable man. He'll do a good job. But his jurisdiction is quite limited. The happiest people in the world, of course, are the Republicans in Congress, because they now say, well, don't blame us. Look, we have a special counsel. The problem's been resolved. But the American public are not going to learn what they really are interested in learning. And I suspect the trip to Israel, there'll be a lot of forced smiles of people appearing to be very happy with President Trump, but upset about the leaking of the information, upset about his apparent change of mind about moving the embassy to Jerusalem, at least at the moment, upset at the fact that some within the Trump administration declared that the Western Wall, the Kotel, is not really part of Israel, but part of the West Bank, an absurdly stupid statement.
Well, that's an issue we're going to be dealing with a little later into the show, for sure.
Yeah, but this is going to be a tense visit, a lot of forced smiles, a lot of apparent friendship, but beneath the surface, there'll be some anger.
Now, you spoke a lot about the legality of Trump's leaking of that information to Russia. The American president has the ability to declassify anything at any time, but should that be changed? Have we learned any type of lesson from this scenario?
I think we have. I think, first of all, presidents should not be told about sources and methods. They don't need to know them. There was no reason the president had to be told what city this information came from, because it was that disclosure that could lead ISIS to identify, if there is a spy, who the spy is. Let's remember, too, that one of the major villains here, in addition to what happened in the Oval Office, is the fact that two intelligence officers, one former and one current, deliberately, willfully, and knowingly committed felonies by leaking this information to the Washington Post. Had they not leaked the information to the Washington Post, only the Russians would know about it. And the ISIS would not know about it because Russia is not on speaking terms with ISIS. And even the countries that Russia is on speaking terms with, the enemies of Israel in Syria and Iran, don't necessarily want to support ISIS. So I don't blame the Washington Post for publishing the story, but I blame very strongly the employees of the United States, former and current, who decided to take the law into their own hands and commit crimes in order to leak this story in a way that was extremely damaging to national intelligence and perhaps damaging to Israel and perhaps damaging to the safety of all of us who fly airplanes and don't want to be blown out of the sky by laptops.
Now, this isn't the only issue that has been on Israel's mind. Several people who are associated with the Trump administration have made some surprising statements that you referred to earlier in our conversation this week regarding Israel's connection to Jerusalem. Two officials from the American Jerusalem consulate are saying that the Western Wall is not part of Israel, but officials from the White House are claiming that those statements are not reflective of the administration's true beliefs. At the same time, other senior officials are not recanting these statements. So what is going on here?
Well, the people who made those statements should be fired. They are such stupid statements. Whatever you may think about Israel's claim on the Kotel and other areas, it was never part of the West Bank. Think about the history. The history was in 1947, the UN declared that Jerusalem would be an international city. The Jordanians broke that agreement. They attacked Israel. They illegally captured the Western Wall, destroyed many Jewish buildings, including the great synagogue with its wonderful arch. The idea that that area properly belonged to Jordan, it was part of the West Bank, is ahistorical and just plain ordinary stupid. And anybody who makes that kind of statement must be bigoted in his or her motivations. So I think there has to be some firing done. I think the United States has to reiterate that its strong policy is that Israel completely lawfully controls the religious sites, the Jewish quarter, that it was never part of the West Bank. And that's just a fact. It was never part of the West Bank. It was certainly never a lawful part of the West Bank. Jordan violated the UN resolution by capturing those areas in an aggressive, illegal war against Israel, with all the Arab countries aiding it in an attempt to destroy the new state of the Jewish people. So I think diplomats ought to know their history and ought not to be making these kinds of foolish and bigoted comments about areas that are properly part of Israel under any view of the law or any view of the facts.
Well, we're just going to have to wait a few more days to see how these comments actually have an impact on the upcoming presidential visit to Israel. All right, let's turn now to some of our guests. Our first guest is your friend and Israel Prize winner and basketball legend Tal Brody. Tal was receiving an honorary doctorate at Bar-Ilan University, but instead of asking his own question, Tal handed the ball over to his friend Michael Werner from New York. Michael wants to ask you about President Trump, a subject that is on everybody's mind. So let's listen.
So Tal gets an assist and Michael gets the basket. Okay.
There you go. That's how it works.
This is Michael. I'm here with my buddy Tal, my wife Dana, Tal's wife Tirza, and we came to celebrate Tal's induction and honorarium at Bar-Ilan University. My question of you, Mr. Dershowitz, is having seen and heard a lot about Trump and last week's interview with Larry King. My question is, do you think that any of that news is real, or do you think the media is just blowing things out of proportion to do something to Trump when they should be focusing and concentrating on the important things in the United States and the rest of the world?
Well, first of all, Mazel Tov Tal for getting a well-deserved honorary doctorate from a university. We're now brothers. I have a doctorate from that university. So today, both of us can paraphrase President Kennedy today, Ich bin ein Bar-Ilaner. Today, we are both Bar-Ilaners. And congratulations, Michael, for your great friendship with Tal. Tal is one of Israel's most remarkable people. I wish he were back in the United States playing for the Celtics, who are losing to Cleveland. I think Tal's participation on our side would have increased our chances of keeping LeBron James down to below 30 points. And now back to your question about Trump. Look, we need a system of checks and balances in our country, and the media serves that important function. Remember, the American media is not like Haaretz. The American media is very patriotic. I think for the most part, it treats issues relatively fairly. Of course, it has points of view. Fox is different from CNN, but no newspaper that I know of in the world is as antagonistic to its country and its government as Haaretz is. And so it's not surprising to me that not very many Israelis read Haaretz, but that it's widely read by Israel's enemies around the world. So the media is very important. I defend Haaretz's right to publish many of the falsehoods that it publishes, particularly by several of its columnists, Levy and Hess. But the right to publish is very important, and the right of the American press to publish is very important. But I think it's also important to have contrary views presented. And I think in both our countries, we have contrary views presented. So, complaining about the media is not a solution to the problem of democratic governance. I think Thomas Jefferson once said, given a choice between a government without newspapers and newspapers without a government, he would pick newspapers without a government. But then when he served as president, he changed his mind. He said, there's nothing worse than the way newspapers cover the presidency. So every president from Adams and Jefferson to President Trump have complained about the media. I think it's better to look inward and focus on what mistakes you've made rather than blaming the media for reporting the mistakes.
Now, another person who has been under the spotlight in terms of media coverage is the new U.S. ambassador, David Friedman, who has just arrived to Israel to take office. His arrival comes just 1 week before President Trump's first visit as president. And my question for you is, in your opinion, what are the real challenges that he will be facing here on the ground?
I know David. He's a brilliant lawyer, very accomplished. He has views on Israel that are different from my own, but he has told me in person, and he's stated publicly, that as ambassador, he represents the views of the United States of America and the Trump administration. And I'm sure he'll be fair and represent the United States fairly. I think he'll have a good relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other members of the government. And I look forward to David performing with great distinction whenever I come to Israel. Often I go to the home of the U.S. ambassador, whoever he or she may be, and I present a seminar, an academic seminar. I've spoken to David about doing that when I come to Israel next, and he's already invited me to come to his home. I hope someday, in the not too distant future, I will be able to present a seminar at the home of the ambassador in Jerusalem, not in Herzliya. That day may not be tomorrow or the next day, but I hope and believe it will be within the terms of this president's administration.
All right, Professor. Well, let's turn to a very, very different topic. Turning back to the Bar Ilan ceremony, another honoree was Professor Shafi Goldwasser, who splits her time between MIT and the Weizmann Institute. She's one of the leading experts in cryptology. She's interested in hearing your take on the balance between cyber technology and civil liberties. So let's hear from her.
Hi, I'm Shafi Goldwasser. I'm in Bar Ilan right now. I just received an honorary doctorate. These are two of my ex-students, Adir Kavya and Guy Rothblum. And actually I have a special connection with Professor Dershowitz because another friend of ours, a common friend, Arya Bebchuk, has been promising me for about 35 years that he's going to get us together for dinner, and I'm still waiting. But more to the point, we work on cryptography and privacy, and today with all the cameras everywhere, all the information that everyone has on us, it's a very important question. How do we maintain our privacy and dignity, and at the same time are able to harvest all this incredible knowledge that's out there in order to better the world in terms of, saving energy, routing traffic, saving perhaps from terrorism or whatever dangers that, await us, and yet make absolutely sure that as much as possible we keep our right to be left alone. So, Professor Dershowitz, what do you think about this?
Thank you so much. Probably the reason your invitation to have dinner hasn't arrived is because you probably did it in code, and I don't know how to break codes, although one of my good friends is Michael Rabin, the former provost, or whatever he's called, of Hebrew University and a professor at Harvard and MIT, and one of the world's leading authorities on cryptography. And Michael and I have had discussions about these issues, and I would welcome an opportunity to have a discussion with you. Look, the law always has to stay ahead of technology, and it almost never does. Technology moves so quickly, particularly cyber technology is moving so quickly that the law has had great difficulty catching up with it. In the United States, we're seeing some statutes being proposed that would compromise our security and privacy in the interest just of commercial use of private information for business and money-making purposes. I think we have to strike the appropriate balance. It's very important for national security people to be able to overhear conversations between terrorists to try to break up terrorist plans. There are many ways of doing that. Spies on the ground, that is what maybe President Trump's disclosures and the leaks may have endangered in terms of, is there an Israeli spy at the highest levels of ISIS? But second, of course, one of the major ways of gathering information to prevent terrorism is through cyber technology and cryptography and all of those issues. And striking the appropriate balance is the great challenge of the 21st century. What I worry greatly about is that the young generation, kids today in their teens and early 20s, don't seem to care as much about privacy as older folks like us. I don't mean to suggest you're old, but me, I'm old. We value our privacy enormously, but the younger generation seems to want to put everything on Facebook, on Twitter, on Snapchat. People send photographs of themselves in positions, compromising positions to friends without the realization the friends then can make them go viral. We've had tragedies, suicides in our country as a result of cyberbullying. So these are all issues. I wish I were back teaching at Harvard Law School after 50 years, because I know I would be teaching courses in how to control and make best use of growing technology. We never will stop technology. Laws have never succeeded in stopping the progress of science. The challenge is to constrain technology and to make it serve our interests rather than controlling our future. And we have to give substantial weight to privacy and substantial weight to national security, and striking that balance is one of the great challenges that we face as a people.
Absolutely. All right, Professor, joining us now in the studio is Dr. Mordechai Cobell, who served for 25 years in the IDF military intelligence and is an expert on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Two-state solution, one-state solution. The options for reaching a peace deal often seem limited, but Dr. Cobell has another solution that he wants to talk about.
Sure.
Good morning, Alan. How are you?
Hi.
Look, since nobody, and you will agree with me, nobody can assure that a Palestinian state will never become another Hamastan, either by elections, as happened in 2006, or by coup d'etat, as already happened in 2007 in Gaza. I came out with a new paradigm to think about the Middle East through the real sociology of the Middle East, which talks about tribalism, which in the Middle East is not only alive and kicking, it is alive and killing, as you know, as we see today, already for 6 years. Therefore, in order to achieve some kind of stability, we have to establish 8 Palestinian Emirates. One already exists in Gaza, led by Hamas. Another one should be in Hebron, for the clans of Hebron. Another one in Jericho, for the clans of the Arikat clan of Jericho. Another one in Ramallah, for the clans of Ramallah. Just like Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Kuwait, which every one of them is stable and rich, not because of the oil, but because of the stability, social stability. And this paradigm, I came out, there is a website which I established with this, with a friend from Florida, www.palestinianemirates.com, because states, modern states like Syria, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Yemen, are failing states because they were built by European ideas, while only Middle Eastern ideas like tribalism can survive, as we see very clearly in the Gulf. And this is the only way how to go forward, which will give Palestinians, most of the Palestinians in the West Bank, freedom from Israel, those who sit in the cities, while will give Israel security. They can have flourishing emirates in the cities. What would you say about this?
Well, it's a very interesting idea, but I think you're addressing it to the wrong audience. I think you have to address it essentially to the Palestinians and see whether they would accept this kind of solution. Many radicals will just describe it as Bantustans in a very negative way.
Well, I'm talking about Emirates, not
I
Bantustan.
understand that, but language is everything. You call it an emirate, they call it a Bantustan, and the question is who makes the decision. It would be, I think, an interesting thing to do. You're absolutely right. The trend in the world today is breaking up countries rather than uniting them. The
Look, what happened with the Soviet Union, this is what happened with Yugoslavia after a bloody war in the 90s. And this what happened with Czechoslovakia.
Look, I agree with you. I've always said a good divorce is better than a bad marriage. Right. And breaking up countries into their component parts. The 19th century, we saw countries united. Italy was a series of city-states and regions, and then it got united. Germany, many other countries of Europe started out as equivalent to emirates and clannish. Now in the Middle East, it's even more serious. So, your solution is an interesting one, worthy of being considered. But if Israel imposes the solution, it will be seen as a colonial, imperialistic imposition of Bantustans on what is a united entity. So I think that what you have to do is try to persuade the Palestinians that it's in their best interest. The other possibility, of course, is a compromise, and that is to have the emirate situation and then to create some kind of an informal federation. But that's something, again, that the Palestinians would probably have to decide for themselves. In the 21st century, generally, we do not look positively on powerful states telling less powerful people how to organize themselves. But I think you ought to continue to try to advocate this within the Palestinian groups and areas.
Well,
and
I sit with them. I sit with them much, and they agree.
Very successful, and it could include, for example, areas within Israel. If you take the Arab-Israeli areas around the Triangle and other places, they might indeed want to, on self-determination, declare themselves to be a unit within Israel, subject to the protection of Israel. I think some of the issues that will arise, of course, is police forces, demilitarization, passage, security. These are all complicated, but look, keep thinking. It's so important to keep thinking about these issues. We shouldn't be stuck on one formulation. I would like to go to your website and continue to read about it. I'm still a reluctant advocate of the old two-state solution, but I recognize its problems, particularly with Gaza not being part of the two-state solution, with problems occurring in Jordan, with ISIS coming closer to the borders of Israel, with Syria in disarray. These are all very serious issues, and I think any creative solutions and suggestions of the kind that you've put forward have to be given very serious consideration. So thank you for keeping thinking, and keep your thinking cap on.
Yeah, this whole idea came because I'm also a Bar-Ilaner. I am a teacher there in the Department of Arabic. I deal with
great university.
I deal with Arabic culture. What happened in the Middle East, the tragedy is that European ideas created Arab countries, and it doesn't work. It's just like to fix your Chevrolet in a garage of Harley Davidson. It's not the same culture. This is why those states are failing states. Only the states in the Middle East which were created upon the local culture, which is tribalism, like Kuwait and Qatar, and which every one of these one clan, one big clan, but is one homogeneous society. These countries are flourishing even without oil, like Dubai. Conglomerates of tribes, of ethnic groups, of religious and sectarian groups like Iraq, like Syria, like Libya, like Yemen, and like Sudan are failing states in spite of the oil.
No, I agree with you. I completely agree with your negative criticism. I completely agree that these artificial states that were drawn with a pencil and a ruler by distant countries like England and France have been an utter failure. But I would like to see the suggestion for this come from within the Palestinian people rather than imposed from outside.
All right, guys, it looks like we're running out of time.
You have to prevail in the marketplace of ideas.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Dershowitz, and for your time, Dr. Cobell. Thanks for all of our guests. And if you'd like Professor Dershowitz to answer your questions, go to iltv.tv or our Facebook page and submit them. We'll see you again next week.